You see me, and I know what you're thinking.
This guy's got a mustache. His face is about 50% forehead, and he has one of the highest widow peaks I've ever fucking seen right here. And I bet he does not suffer from any sort of anxiety.
And let me tell you, and this might come as a shock, that's not correct. No, on the contrary, I do have a lot of anxiety. It used to be a lot worse, but guess who's got 2 thumbs and went to therapy for 3 years? Me? What the fuck? Now, one of the ways that my anxiety presents itself is through constant worst-case scenario thinking. It's a bit like a superpower. No matter what situation I'm in, I can imagine what's the worst possible outcome, and I can then be totally convinced that's the outcome that's gonna happen. Like, I'll be sitting at my desk on a normal day and I'll hear an airplane go by outside and I'll be like, oh, that's likely to crash into my specific building. What a bummer. But I'm not here to just talk about my anxiety. That gets very tedious, I happen to know. My therapist told me so. No, I'm here today to hopefully transfer some of my anxiety to you. You see, when I was a kid, I had this book. No idea what it was called, but it was one of those books that have like weird phenomena, spooky stories and everything like that. First time I ever heard about Swedish UFO phenomena, that's a thing. Mothman and the Bermuda Triangle was from this book, all of which are very cool, so thank you, unnamed book. However, there was one thing in this book that really stuck with me and still sticks with me to this day, and that's spontaneous human combustion. You've probably heard of the phenomenon before, and if the name isn't self-explanatory enough, it's when a human combusts into flames in a way that can only be described as spontaneous. And that's what I want to talk about today, so I'm gonna do it. We'll start with a case that is generally considered to be the first recorded case of spontaneous human combustion, and the name that I'll butcher, Cornelia Sangeri Bundy. That's the best I can do. Now, Cornelia was a countess, or a noblewoman, if you will. Presumably she lived in some big mansion because she had a bunch of maids around her. And on the 15th of March, 1731, she was having dinner. During dinner, it's reported that she said to her maids that she was feeling dull and heavy. That's the weirdest quotation marks I've ever done. So after dinner, one of her maids followed her up to her room and they hung out and prayed, apparently, for about 3 hours, after which the countess fell asleep and the maid left the room. The countess was asleep as she left, so we know for a fact that she did fall asleep. The next morning, the maid notices that Cornelia hasn't come down from her room at her usual time, so she goes to the bottom of the stairs and she goes, Cornelia! Or I don't know if she would call her by name, maybe she's like, Mistress. Mistress, is that? Noblewoman Cornelia. Oh, mistress. No, mistress is like when you cheat on someone, right? Madam. Ma'am, Cornelia. Something along those lines. No reply. So fearing that something's happened, she goes up the stairs, puts her hand on the doorknob, twists it, slowly opens it up, and Cornelia is just all kinds of fucked up. Basically, the scene is described as just between the bed and the window, there is a pile of ashes. Pretty much all of Cornelia has turned into ashes, except 1 foot still with a slipper on, 3 fingers for some reason, and the front of her skull. The bed, all the surrounding furniture, everything is untouched by the fire. It is, however, covered in a moist and ash-colored soot that apparently smelled very foul. As I said, the pile of ashes was located on the floor right between the bed and the window, and apparently the bed covers were lifted from one corner and like neatly put down like that. I'll put a picture here just so you know what I mean. So it was like she had just done the thing of getting out of bed, not in a panic because it's all kind of neat, and then taken 2 steps towards a window to open it, something she apparently had a habit of doing in the middle of the night. And then just somewhere between the bed and the window, she's just completely burned to ashes, to nothing. And that's all we know. They couldn't determine any cause of death from the pile of ashes, and yeah. But again, this was all the way back in the 1700s, and it's just the first case. I just wanted to give that as like sort of a little introduction to the thing. Let's move on to a more modern example. At approximately 8 a.m., July 2nd, 1951, a landlady named Pansy Carpenter, great name by the way, really appreciate that, headed over to one of her tenants, Mary Reeser, to deliver a telegram. Upon arriving though, she noticed that the door handle was very hot, and therefore she called the police. The police came, got in through the door and looked around the apartment, and at first everything seemed fine That is until they peep the corner of the living room in which there is just a pile of ashes. Surprise, surprise. Other than the pile of ashes, there was the remains of a chair, a human foot wearing a slipper, a human backbone, and a human skull that I'll get back to the skull. Plastic objects in the vicinity of the area where it had burned were bent out of shape and had been affected by the heat of the fire, but other than that, no furniture or anything was damaged by the fire. Okay, so the skull. I personally think that the whole skull thing is just a big fuck up, but it needs to be mentioned because it's a big part of this specific case. So apparently the skull, when they found it, had shrunk. How much it had shrunk depends a little bit on like who you ask or like what statement you read, but some say to the size of a teacup, which if true, I think is a lot weirder than the fact that she just caught fire for no reason, because heat has a tendency to not shrink bone in that way. I've never heard of finding a skull and being like, oh yeah, look at this little thing. Must have been a fire. Some corner or something fucked up. I read that someone said that it's probably just like an optical illusion due to the fact that like most human extremities, like the way the skull kind of goes out a little bit, like the fucking nose bone or whatever it's called, has been, you know, burned away and it just looked a lot smaller than people expected, and then just word of mouth. I don't know. I don't think the skull thing is really relevant. I think it's very funny though that they found a tiny little skull there, even though I don't think that actually happened, but I digress. Again, that's all we know about this case. They couldn't determine what had happened. Her surviving daughter said that she was a heavy smoker and would sit there and smoke, and just said, yeah, she dropped her cigarette on her clothes and then her body fat caught on fire. But I don't know. If you drop gasoline on the floor and then flick a cigarette on it, like in Con Air, that gasoline won't light. That's a movie thing. That doesn't really happen. I just have such a hard time thinking that a cigarette, you like drop a cigarette and then your body catches fire. I mean, I guess the clothes catches fire first, but I'm still skeptical about it. But yeah, that's the case of Mary Reeser. Now, we're gonna move on to the case that was the case that I read in the book as a kid and that has haunted me ever since. This is the case of Robert Francis Bailey. And the story goes like this. 1967 in home of Harry Potter, London. 1967 in London, England, a woman on the way to her job looks in through a window and sees what looks like a blue flame. She meets up with some of her colleagues and goes, "If I may disturb you for just a second." It's fucking Australian. "Pardon me, yes. That window over there, I see a fire there. Would you happen to by chance also see the fire?" Okay, I can't do it. Excuse me. Do you see the fire in that window over there? Yeah, I do. Yeah. Should we call someone about that? Probably. Yeah, so they find a phone somehow and they call the fire brigade. First to arrive on the scene is Officer Jack Stacy. Stacy can also see the fire, so he climbs up a ladder on the outside of the building, gets to the window, manages to get it open, and gets inside. And now I'm gonna quickly read a direct transcript of his witness statement here, and I guess fair warning, this does contain a couple of parts that are a little icky.
When I got in through the window, I found the body of a tramp named Bailey laying at the bottom of the stairs leading up to the second floor. There was a 4-inch slit in his abdomen from which was issuing, at force, a blue flame. The flame was beginning to burn the wooden stairs. We extinguished the flames by playing a hose into the abdominal cavity. Bailey was alive when he started burning. He must have been in terrible pain. His teeth were sunk into the mahogany newel posts of the staircase. I had to prise his jaws apart to release the body. The fire was coming from within the abdomen of his body.
Jesus, and I can't stress this enough, Christ. The flames which, again, were coming out of this guy's body had apparently burned an area of about 6 foot squared, and for those of us who use actual measurements that make sense, that's about half a meter squared. Furthermore, the flames coming out of Bailey's body had fully incinerated his right hand. I'm assuming from, you know, putting his hands on the part of his body where the fucking flames of hell were coming out of him. I have another statement from an interview that Jack Stacy did a few years later.
The flame itself was coming out from the abdomen. There was a slit of about 4 inches.
That's about 10 centimeters.
In the abdomen, and the flame was coming through there at force, like a blow lamp. A bluish flame, which would indicate that there was some kind of spirit involved in it. There's no doubt whatsoever that the fire began inside the body. That's the only place it could have begun, inside that body.
And I couldn't find much about this Jack Stacy guy other than 1, he's a firefighter. I would trust him when it comes to, you know, the logistics of fire. 2, he firmly did not believe in the supernatural. When he said spirit before, he meant alcohol, not, you know, a spooky Holy Ghost or something. And 3, Jack Stacy? Make up your mind. Is you're gonna have a boy's name or a girl's name? Thank you. Thanks. Yeah, thank you. I don't know why Bailey was in this building that they had to go in through a window, because he is described as a tramp, meaning he was a homeless person. But it is a known fact that Bailey was not a smoker, and that when they later attempted to determine a cause of death, they determined it to be asphyxia due to the inhalation of fire fumes. Homeboy fucking died from a fire going on inside of his body. And the fumes, and he died. What the fuck? Also, I've never used the word homeboy before. Did it sound natural? And just a quick message to Jack Stacy, the fireman, who continued to claim that the reason for this was that Bailey drank too much. First of all, thank you for your service, sir. Thank you, and second of all, you're an idiot, sir. That makes absolutely no sense. A lot of people drink a lot of alcohol. Very few people have a fucking blowtorch, your words, coming out of their stomach. It doesn't make any sense. And that's all there is to that case. I mean, there's details that I didn't bring up, but like, yeah, that's the whole story. Now, what can be said about SHC overall? Yeah, in the fandom, we usually shorten it to SHC. Well, in a book from 1823 called Medical Jurisprudensum, they listed a few commonalities among the recorded cases of spontaneous human combustion. 1. The victims are chronic alcoholics, which isn't really true if you look into more cases, but okay. 2. They are elderly female. Again, this was written in the 1800s, so the Bailey thing hadn't happened yet, but also not true. 3. The body has not burned spontaneously, but some lighted substance has come into contact with it. Which, that's, you know, what? Huh? 4. The hands and feet usually fall off. Yeah. Uh-huh. The body burned, right?
Well, after thorough examination, I have come to the conclusion that all of these decapitated bodies seem to be missing their heads. How do you explain that? Are you an idiot?
5.
The fire
has caused very little damage to combustible items in contact with the body. Which is true, that is part of the mystery. And the last point, number 6, the combustion of the body has left a residue of greasy and fatty ashes very offensive in odor. Which we don't have to go into detail, but I have to imagine that that happens regardless if it's a spontaneous combustion or not, right? It probably doesn't smell wonderful generally when people, you know, burn to death. Now I'm gonna start finishing things up here, but you might be sitting there thinking that, like,
Hey, all of these cases are fucking ancient and old. They used to believe that women being horny was like ghosts in their blood as well. So this doesn't really concern me.
but hold on a second, there's been modern cases of this. There was a case in 2010, a Michael Faraday, a 76-year-old man in County Galway, Ireland, was recorded as spontaneous combustion by the coroner. The doctor, Ciaran McLaughlin, made this statement at the inquiry into the death. This fire was thoroughly investigated, and I'm left with the conclusion that this fits into the category of spontaneous human combustion for which there is no adequate explanation. And another wild case that I found when researching this that I hadn't heard of before is of this Indian baby named Rahul, who was born in 2013 but who survived his SHC. Unfortunately though, that's not where the story ends, because it's happened to him 4 times. And I know this is a real person, so I'm not gonna be too insensitive. If the actual Rahul is watching this, stay safe, buddy. But if I can give one tip, check out this video of how to survive death based on the Final Destination lore, because I think it's out to get you. And that's about everything I have on spontaneous combustion. There's a bunch more cases you can read up on. I really recommend it. I just wanted to share some of the ones that I find extra interesting and also share my anxiety with you, because the thing for me is that it kind of feels like now that I know it can happen, it'll happen any second. Like if I sit down and I think to it too much, suddenly I'm gonna just burst into flames. And now that might happen to you. In fact, it might happen right now. Imagine if one of you did catch fire right there. I would never know. How would I find out? I guess if the cops look at the computer to see what the last thing they were doing were, and they see a video of me talking about spontaneous human combustion, damn, I might be going to jail for that. That's some witchcraft type shit. But anyway, thank you so much for watching this very impromptu video. If it looks more shit than usual, like the green screen, the light, everything, my face, it's because this was a lot more impromptu than they usually are. I want to try to inch towards being able to create these videos a little faster. But anyway, thank you for watching. If you enjoyed any part of this, please consider my Patreon. I always say that, but I never say what's on the Patreon. Basically, what's on the Patreon is little updates about what's going on, behind the scenes footage from 10 tapes, my ARG, probably some behind the scenes photos going forward. I mean, I'm trying to come up with incentives for you to want to go there, but most of all, it's just a place where you can, if you please, choose to donate some money to me, and I can use that to pay rent and eat food and create this content. And if you're worried about me slacking around and becoming rich on your hard-earned money, I can let you in on a secret. I don't even have 30 patrons. I guess I'll put them on screen right now. First, the co-producers. These are the people that pay above a certain tier, and here is all the rest of my patrons. And I'm so thankful to all of you. You're enabling me to do this kind of thing without having to have a full-time job. Not that this covers... Why am I going into all of the details? But it's not like this covers all my bills. I also have a part-time editing job for the YouTube channel Disrupt. Check that out, I guess, but since they have like millions of subscribers, I don't think they need me to tell anyone about them. I'm rambling at this point. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye. Jesus Christ. And usually, in one way or another, my cat has a little cameo somewhere. Not in every video, but in most of them. And she's being very adorable right now, so I'm gonna just tip the camera down. There she is. Oh, big stretch. This over here is the script that I've been shooting with, and I am wearing my girlfriend's, office pants, I guess. Okay. Bye-bye.